While Emily was slowly learning to rebuild her life under Henry Blackwood's quiet protection, David Carter was basking in what he believed was triumph. 3 months after forcing Emily out, he married Vanessa Moore in a lavish ceremony covered by society columns. The photos splashed across magazines painted them as the perfect couple. David in a tailored Armani suit, Vanessa glowing in a diamond-encrusted gown, her wealthy father proudly standing beside them. To the outside world, it seemed David had traded up. He had gone from a modest apartment and a schoolteacher wife to penthouses, luxury cars, and a glamorous socialite at his side. He strutted into parties with Vanessa draped on his arm like a trophy, and he reveled in the envious whispers of his peers. David Carter really knows how to climb, people said. But behind the shimmering facade, the cracks had already begun to spread. Vanessa was not the dream David had imagined. She was beautiful, yes, but her beauty came with a price tag. Her taste for designer clothes, private spa retreats, and exotic vacations drained money faster than David could keep up. Although her family was wealthy, Vanessa demanded David prove himself. "My father won't respect a man who lives off my inheritance," she sneered one evening when he suggested asking for financial help. "You said you'd build an empire, David. Where is it?" The pressure ate at him. At work? His reputation was slipping. Without Emily's quiet support to balance his recklessness, David's mistakes multiplied. He made risky trades, lost clients, and started gambling on ventures he'd barely understood. But he couldn't admit weakness. At home, he masked failure with arrogance, pouring expensive whiskey into crystal glasses and boasting about big deals that didn't exist. Vanessa, sharp and calculating, saw through the lies. She tolerated him only as long as he kept up appearances. The moment his mask slipped, her disdain was brutal. "You're not the man I thought I married," she hissed one night after a gala where David drank too much and embarrassed himself in front of her father. "Maybe Emily was right about you. Maybe you are just ordinary." Her words cut deeper than a knife. David had abandoned everything, his wife, his unborn child, his past, for Vanessa's promise of a glittering future. Now, the very woman he had betrayed Emily for was looking at him with contempt. Still, David clung to denial. He convinced himself he could win Vanessa back by securing one big success. He doubled down on risky investments, gambled with money he didn't have, and whispered promises to Vanessa that the breakthrough is coming soon. But the nights grew longer, the debts heavier, and the silence between them louder. When Vanessa disappeared for weekends under the excuse of visiting friends, David pretended not to notice the unfamiliar perfume lingering on her clothes. One evening, as he sat alone in their penthouse, staring at unpaid bills, a photo of Emily suddenly appeared on his phone. It had been posted by a local charity page, Emily smiling faintly as she helped children with books. His chest tightened. For a brief, guilty second, he remembered the woman who once loved him unconditionally. David quickly shoved the thought away. "She's nothing," he muttered. "I made the right choice." But deep down, a flicker of fear stirred, because if Emily had survived without him, what else was she capable of becoming? Emily Carter had learned to survive by staying invisible. Even in Henry Blackwood's world, with all its glittering wealth and quiet power, she kept her head low. She never told anyone her last name. She never revealed the cruel truth of her past. To the neighbors, she was just a young single mother. Henry had chosen to sponsor through one of his charity programs, and Emily was content to let them believe it. Her life now was far removed from the shelter and the hunger she once endured. Her twin daughters, tiny, perfect miracles, thrived in the safety of Henry's townhouse. Their laughter filled the rooms, turning the sterile elegance into something warm and alive. Every night, Emily tucked them in with whispered promises that they would never know the pain she had suffered. Yet despite her blessings, a shadow clung to her heart. She avoided cameras at charity events, pulled her hood up in crowded streets, and prayed no one from her past would recognize her. David's betrayal had left scars deeper than any wound. She didn't fear him out of love, she feared him out of memory. The memory of his cruelty, his threats, his willingness to discard her as if she were nothing. Henry, perceptive as always, noticed her hesitation. He never pushed, but he offered opportunities. "Come with me to the gala," he said one evening, his tone almost casual. "You don't have to speak, just watch. Learn how these people move, how they talk. You'll see you're no less than any of them." Emily shook her head. "I can't. If someone recognizes me." Henry's gaze softened, though his words were firm. "You think hiding will protect you. But hiding only gives your enemies more power. One day, Emily, you'll have to step into the light." For now, she wasn't ready. But slowly, in small steps, she began to reclaim pieces of herself. She joined the children's literacy program Henry had suggested, helping underprivileged kids discover the joy of reading. Standing in front of a classroom again felt like touching an old part of her soul. The children didn't care about her past. To them, she was just Miss Emily, the kind woman who brought stories to life. With each smile, each thank you, her confidence flickered back to life. She began dressing differently too, not in luxury gowns, but in clean, elegant clothes Henry's assistant quietly provided. Clothes that reminded her she could be both a mother and a woman with dignity. Still, fear never fully left her. At night, she sometimes woke in a sweat, convinced David's voice was in the hallway, that he had come to rip her children from her arms. She would rush to the nursery, heart pounding, only to find her daughters sleeping peacefully. Henry never commented on her fears, but one night, after seeing the panic in her eyes, he said quietly, "Whatever demons you're running from, they won't find you here. Not while I'm standing." Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe the shadows couldn't reach her anymore. But she knew the world had a cruel sense of timing. And as she held her daughters close, she didn't realize that her carefully built anonymity was about to crack wide open. Because soon, someone from David's circle would see her face where she least expected it. It happened on an ordinary Saturday afternoon, in the most unexpected of places. Emily had taken her twin daughters to a small shopping plaza in Manhattan. She chose the quietest spots, away from flashing cameras and bustling crowds, a habit born from years of fear. Today, the girls were giggling as they clutched new picture books, their golden curls bouncing as they skipped at her side. Emily smiled faintly, her heart swelling with pride. To the world, they were just two happy little girls, but to her, they were living proof that love could survive betrayal. And then fate struck. Across the plaza, David Carter strolled out of a luxury watch boutique. Vanessa's manicured hand looped possessively through his arm. He was dressed sharply, flashing the same smug grin he always wore in public. But the moment his gaze drifted across the crowd, his smile froze. His eyes locked on Emily. For a heartbeat, he thought he was hallucinating. The woman he had discarded 3 years ago, the woman he assumed had crumbled into nothing, was standing just yards away. She looked different, stronger somehow, her posture more poised, her beauty no longer hidden by insecurity. And beside her, 2 little girls who looked strikingly familiar. David's stomach dropped. "David, what is it?" Vanessa asked, following his gaze. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Emily. Who is that?" David's chest tightened. He knew instantly. The shape of the girls' faces, the glint of their eyes, it was like staring at his own bloodline. His mind spun in disbelief. She hadn't gone through with it. She had kept the babies. Emily's heart pounded when she noticed him. For a split second, her breath caught in her throat, her past crashing back like a tidal wave. She tightened her grip on her daughter's hands, whispering softly, "Stay close, sweethearts." The plaza seemed to shrink, the noise fading into silence. Time stopped as they stared at each other across the space that once bound them as husband and wife. David took a step forward, confusion and anger warring on his face. "Emily?" he muttered under his breath. She turned sharply, guiding her daughters toward the exit. She didn't owe him an explanation. He had thrown her out like trash. He had told her to destroy the very lives now walking proudly beside her. But David wasn't ready to let her disappear. He broke free from Vanessa's grip and strode toward them, his voice rising. "Emily, wait." Heads turned. People began to notice the scene unfolding. Emily's pulse quickened. This wasn't how she wanted her daughters to discover their father, the man who had chosen power over love. She quickened her pace, her heels clicking against the pavement, desperate to escape before the past consumed her again. Behind her, David's voice rang out, louder, desperate. "Are they? Mine?" The words cut through the air like a blade. Vanessa gasped, her face twisting in fury as whispers rippled through the crowd. Emily didn't turn back. She gripped her daughter's hands tighter, and led them swiftly into the parking lot, her chest burning with panic. But David was already pushing through the crowd, his eyes locked on her, his voice trembling with shock. And as Emily slammed the car door shut and drove away, she knew the fragile shield of her anonymity had shattered. Because David had seen the truth in the faces of the daughters he never wanted. The encounter at the plaza haunted Emily for days. She prayed it had been nothing more than a chance collision, that David would dismiss what he had seen. But fate was rarely so kind. The moment came a week later. Henry Blackwood had invited Emily to accompany him to a literacy charity event downtown. At first, she resisted. Crowds meant exposure, and exposure meant risk. But Henry's voice had been calm, certain. You can't hide forever, Emily. Besides, you'll be surrounded by people who see you as an ally, not an enemy. Let the world see your strength. She wanted to refuse, but deep down, she knew he was right. She couldn't teach her daughters to be brave while living in fear herself. So, with trembling hands, she dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress Henry's assistant had chosen. Her twins stayed home with a trusted nanny, and for the first time in years, Emily prepared to face the public eye. When the black limousine rolled to a stop in front of the Grand Hotel, flashes erupted instantly. Photographers swarmed the entrance, snapping at Henry Blackwood, the elusive billionaire who rarely appeared in public with anyone at his side. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Henry stepped out first, tall and imposing, then extended his hand back into the car. And then Emily emerged. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The cameras clicked furiously as she stepped onto the red carpet, her hand lightly resting in Henry's. The soft glow of the lights reflected off her calm, composed face. No one knew her name, but her presence was undeniable. She didn't look like a fragile woman carrying scars. She looked like someone who belonged. The whispers started immediately. Who is she? Henry Blackwood's date? Is she a new socialite? By the time Emily and Henry disappeared inside, her image was already spreading across social media. Hashtags bloomed within hours. Blackwood mystery woman, who is she, new power couple. And miles away in their penthouse, David and Vanessa watched the scene unfold on a glossy tablet screen. Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails dug into the leather armrest as her eyes narrowed. That's her, David muttered, his voice low. That's Emily. Vanessa whipped her head toward him, disbelief flashing in her eyes. What do you mean, Emily? Are you saying the woman stepping out of a limousine with Henry Blackwood is your ex-wife? The one you said was weak? The one you swore was gone? David swallowed hard, his face pale. He couldn't look away from the screen. Emily wasn't the broken woman he had abandoned. She looked radiant, untouchable. And beside her was Henry Blackwood, the man who could ruin anyone with a single phone call. Panic and fury warred inside Vanessa. She had built her life on being the upgrade, the replacement. If Emily was truly back, and worse, standing beside a billionaire, then everything Vanessa had fought for could crumble. You better fix this, she hissed. Because if she starts talking, do you know what people will say? That you left your wife and unborn children for me. That you forced her out. You'll be destroyed, David, and I'll be dragged down with you. David's mind raced, but he stayed silent. The truth was staring at him, undeniable. Emily hadn't just survived. She had risen. And now the world had noticed. What neither of them knew was that this was only the beginning. Because soon, Emily's face wouldn't just be on gossip blogs. It would be on every society page in New York. Vanessa Moore had spent 3 years building her life on the ruins of Emily's. She had taken the man, the penthouse, and the status. Every gala, every photo shoot, every charity luncheon was proof that she had won. But now, all it took was one image, Emily stepping out of a limousine with Henry Blackwood, for that carefully crafted empire to tremble. From the moment she saw the photos online, Vanessa could think of nothing else. She spent hours scrolling through every gossip page, zooming in on Emily's face, searching for flaws, for cracks, for any proof that Emily was still the pathetic woman she once pitied. But no, Emily looked refined, confident, beautiful in a way Vanessa couldn't dismiss. Worse, Emily wasn't alone. She was with Henry Blackwood. That name carried weight heavier than gold. If Emily had truly aligned herself with him, then Vanessa's position was suddenly fragile. Her own father respected Henry, feared his influence in business circles. If Emily became part of that orbit, Vanessa knew her own standing could evaporate overnight. "I want everything you can find on her," Vanessa snapped at a private investigator she'd hired in secret. "Where she lives, who she talks to, every detail of her life since she left David. And hurry. I don't care how much it costs." The investigator nodded, slipping the envelope of cash into his briefcase. Vanessa's hands trembled as she lit a cigarette, something she only did when panic consumed her. The smoke curled upward, blurring the glittering skyline outside the penthouse windows. She whispered to herself, "She can't take this from me, not after everything I gave up." Meanwhile, David grew quieter each day. He avoided Vanessa's sharp questions, but his eyes betrayed him. She caught him staring at photos of Emily online, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. Rage boiled inside Vanessa. "Don't even think about it," she hissed one evening. "Don't you dare start dreaming about her again. You made your choice. I am your wife now." But even as she spoke the words, doubt gnawed at her. She knew men like David. Ambition guided them. If Emily had truly risen under Henry's protection, then David might see her as a better path once again, and Vanessa would be the one discarded, just as Emily had been. The thought made her sick. She wasn't going to be replaced. Not by a woman she had already defeated once. Days later, the investigator returned with the first scraps of information. He laid photos and documents across the marble kitchen island. Vanessa's eyes widened as she studied them. Emily lived in one of Henry Blackwood's properties. She volunteered at literacy programs, and most damning of all, she had twin daughters, about 3 years old. Vanessa's cigarette slipped from her fingers, burning a hole in the glossy magazine beneath it. Twins. She stared at the grainy photo of the little girls, their golden curls unmistakable. They were David's children, the children Emily had never disposed of. Her blood turned to ice. If the press discovered this, David would be ruined, and by extension, so would she. Their entire marriage, already brittle, would shatter under the weight of scandal. "Those kids," Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "They're the key. If anyone connects them to David." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing with new determination. Because in that moment, Vanessa decided she would do whatever it took to bury Emily once and for all, even if it meant going after the children. The Blackwood Foundation Gala was the crown jewel of New York's social calendar. Politicians, celebrities, and business moguls gathered under glittering chandeliers, their laughter echoing against marble walls. For David Carter, it was the perfect stage to parade Vanessa at his side, the proof that he had ascended into the life he always dreamed of. Dressed in a midnight tuxedo, David smiled for cameras, gripping Vanessa's waist possessively. She glowed in a crimson gown designed to draw attention, her diamond necklace sparkling under the flashbulbs. Together they looked untouchable, the image of power and success. "Smile wider," Vanessa hissed under her breath, her lips never breaking the perfect grin. "This is our night." David obeyed, raising his glass to toast fellow bankers and investors. Yet behind his polished smile, unease lingered. Ever since that day at the plaza, Emily's face haunted him. He told himself she wouldn't dare appear here. She didn't belong in this world anymore. And yet, the fear of seeing her again gnawed at his gut. Then, the room shifted. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Heads turned toward the grand staircase where a limousine had just delivered the next guests. And there she was. Emily descended the marble steps slowly, her hand resting lightly on Henry Blackwood's arm. She wore a sleek ivory gown, simple yet elegant, her golden hair swept into soft waves. The light caught her face, serene and radiant, and the room seemed to hush. Every eye followed her. But it wasn't just Emily. 2 small figures trailed behind her, dressed in matching pale blue dresses, their curls bouncing with each step. The twins. Gasps filled the air. People whispered frantically, cameras flashing as if the city itself needed proof of what they were seeing. David's blood ran cold. Beside him, Vanessa's smile faltered, then stiffened into a mask. She gripped his arm so hard her nails dug into his skin. "Do something," she hissed. Henry's voice carried across the ballroom as he introduced Emily. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet someone very dear to me. This is Emily Carter, and these," he gestured proudly to the girls, "are her daughters." The crowd erupted, questions, whispers, speculation flying like wildfire. Emily Carter? His ex-wife? Are those David's children? What is she doing with Henry Blackwood? David's heart pounded. He wanted to storm across the room, to drag Emily away, to silence the whispers, but he couldn't move. Not with every eye watching, not with the truth written so clearly on the girls' faces. Emily met his gaze across the ballroom. For a moment, time froze. Gone was the fragile woman he had broken. The Emily standing before him was unshakable, her eyes calm and unwavering. She didn't need words to say what he already knew. She had risen far beyond him. Vanessa leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. If she ruins us tonight, David, you're finished, and so am I. But David couldn't answer. His throat was dry, his palms slick. All he could see was Emily, shining in the spotlight he once thought would be his alone. And as the music swelled and cameras flashed, David realized the night he thought would cement his triumph was about to expose the very secrets he had fought to bury. The Blackwood Gala had always been a stage for power. But tonight, the spotlight belonged not to the men in tailored tuxedos or the women draped in diamonds. It belonged to Emily Carter, the woman David had tried to erase from existence. Henry Blackwood held her hand as he led her to the stage. The crowd parted, whispers hissing like waves. Journalists scrambled for better angles, their cameras snapping furiously. Emily's pulse raced. She wanted to disappear, to shrink back into the shadows, but Henry's grip was steady, grounding her. He spoke into the microphone, his voice rich, commanding. For years, this foundation has been dedicated to literacy programs for children across New York. Tonight, I want to honor someone who has quietly given more of herself to this cause than any headline will ever capture. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the ballroom. Henry glanced at Emily, his eyes softer than anyone had ever seen. This woman has faced hardship most of us could never imagine, yet instead of surrendering, she has given hope, strength, and knowledge to countless children. Ladies and gentlemen, Emily Carter. The applause erupted like thunder. Emily's breath caught in her throat. For a moment she froze, blinded by the lights, overwhelmed by the roar of approval. She had never stood in front of a crowd like this, never been celebrated, never been seen for her strength. Tears pricked at her eyes. Across the room, David's face turned pale. His chest burned with rage as he listened to Henry elevate Emily to a pedestal he could never reach. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably beside him, her nails biting into her champagne glass until it nearly cracked. "This isn't happening," David muttered under his breath. "It can't be." But it was. Emily had stepped into the world he once promised her, but she had done it without him. And now she stood in the spotlight, her dignity shining brighter than any jewel in Vanessa's collection. Henry continued, his words sharp as a blade. "I am proud to stand beside this woman, not because of her beauty, though it is obvious, not because of her strength, though it is unshakable, but because she is living proof that true character cannot be destroyed. Emily Carter is the kind of woman I respect most, the kind who builds rather than destroys, the kind who gives rather than takes." The applause grew louder. Some guests rose to their feet. Emily's daughters clapped along, their laughter like bells, unaware of the storm swirling around them. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know if I deserve all this, but I know one thing. Every child deserves a chance to believe in themselves. If I can help give them that, then everything I've endured was worth it." The audience melted. Cameras flashed. In that moment, Emily wasn't a victim, she was a survivor, a mother, a beacon of quiet resilience. David gritted his teeth so hard his jaw ached. He wanted to scream, to drag her off the stage, to expose her secrets. But he couldn't. Not here. Not in front of the world. Vanessa leaned close, her voice dripping venom. "If she thinks she can humiliate us like this, she's dead wrong. We'll crush her. We'll crush them all." And as the crowd cheered Emily's name, David and Vanessa exchanged a look of silent agreement. Because the war had just begun. The gala was over, the chandeliers dimmed, and the last of the guests drifted into the cool night air. Emily lingered near the side entrance, waiting for Henry to finish a conversation with the mayor. Her twins were already asleep in the care of a nanny upstairs, safe from the chaos of flashing cameras. She breathed deeply, the adrenaline still pulsing through her veins. Tonight had been overwhelming, terrifying, and liberating. For the first time she felt as if she truly belonged, but as she stepped into the shadowed hallway, a familiar voice froze her in her tracks. Emily? Her heart clenched. She turned slowly. There he was, David. His once proud shoulders slumped, his eyes wild with something she couldn't name. Desperation. She stiffened. What do you want? David stepped closer, lowering his voice as if the walls themselves might betray him. I need to talk to you, please. Emily's instinct was to walk away, to refuse him the satisfaction of even a glance. But part of her wanted to hear what he could possibly say now, after everything. She folded her arms, her tone icy. Say it quickly. David raked a hand through his hair, his facade of confidence crumbling. I was wrong, Emily, about everything. I made a mistake leaving you. I thought Vanessa was what I wanted, but she's nothing compared to you. You were the one who believed in me, who stood by me. God? I was blind. Emily's jaw tightened. Once, those words would have undone her. Once she would have fallen into his arms, desperate for the love she thought she'd lost. But that woman no longer existed. You didn't make a mistake, she said, her voice steady. You made a choice, and I lived with the consequences. So did our children. David flinched. Our children, he repeated, his voice trembling. Emily, I saw them. I know they're mine. Please, let me be part of their lives. Let me be part of your life again. We can start over. I'll leave Vanessa. I'll give you everything you deserve. She stared at him, disbelief turning into bitter laughter. Everything I deserve? David, you tried to make me destroy them. You threw me into the street like garbage. And now, because you see me standing again, suddenly you remember love? His face twisted in pain. I was scared. I thought I couldn't handle it, but I see now. You've become stronger, more beautiful than ever. We can rebuild, Emily. Together. Her eyes blazed. I don't need you to rebuild. I already did that without you. I don't want your love, David. And my daughters don't need a father who once wished them dead. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. David's breath came in ragged gasps, his pride crumbling into dust. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back sharply. You made your bed, Emily whispered. Now lie in it. Her words cut deeper than any blade. David staggered, his face pale, his eyes hollow. Emily, please. But she turned, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she walked away, her back straight, her head high. What neither of them realized was that Vanessa had been watching from the shadows, and the fury burning in her eyes promised a storm Emily had yet to face. Vanessa Moore had never taken humiliation well, and what happened at the Blackwood Gala was nothing short of public execution. She had spent years carefully curating her image, basking in the glow of being David Carter's glamorous wife, only to watch it crumble in a single evening as Emily Carter, the woman she thought she had destroyed, rose like a phoenix beside Henry Blackwood. But Vanessa wasn't the kind of woman to lick her wounds quietly. No. Vanessa was the kind of woman who sharpened them into weapons. The morning after the gala, she sat at her vanity, staring at her own reflection. The faint shadows under her eyes betrayed a night without sleep, but her lipstick was flawless, her hair perfectly set. She picked up her phone, dialing with manic precision. Get me Marcy, she ordered. Marcy was a society columnist who owed her more than a few favors. When the line connected, Vanessa's voice shifted into syrupy concern. Marcy, darling, have you seen the photos of Henry Blackwood's mystery woman? Of course you have. Well, I shouldn't say this, but between us, she's not what she appears to be. And just like that, the poison began to drip. By noon, whispers spread like wildfire across blogs and tabloids. Headlines screamed, "Who is Emily Carter, Blackwood's new flame or a gold digger with secrets?" Anonymous sources claimed she was a manipulative ex-wife who abandoned her husband and faked her struggles to gain sympathy. Others suggested she had trapped Henry Blackwood, using her children to secure a place in his fortune. Vanessa's lies were calculated, each one twisting the truth. She painted Emily not as a survivor, but as a schemer. She was never devoted to David, Vanessa whispered to journalists. She had other men. Those children, who knows if they're even his? She's been chasing money since the day I met her. David, sitting in his office, read the articles with a sinking stomach. The accusations were ugly, cruel, but the part that made him sweat wasn't the lies, it was the possibility that the press might dig deeper and uncover the truth. And if the truth came out, that he had forced Emily out, that the children were his, it would be the end of him. Vanessa smirked as she watched the storm unfold. Let them destroy her reputation, she said coldly. sipping champagne at 10 in the morning. No one will believe a poor little schoolteacher against me, against us. But Vanessa had underestimated something. Emily was no longer alone. By the afternoon, Henry Blackwood's legal team had already flagged the slanderous articles. Calls were made, lawsuits threatened. Henry himself confronted the editor of the Manhattan Post. His voice was steel. "If you print one more lie about her, I'll buy your entire paper and fire every last one of you." Still, the damage had been done. Social media buzzed with arguments. Was Emily a saint or a sinner, a survivor or a manipulator? Emily sat in the townhouse, staring at the cruel headlines, her hands shaking. The old wounds threatened to reopen, but then from the nursery came the sound of her daughter's laughter. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. She couldn't crumble now. Not again. Henry entered the room quietly, holding a thick envelope. His expression was grim, but his eyes burned with determination. He placed the envelope in her hands. Inside were photographs, emails, and recorded phone calls. Evidence. "Emily," he said softly, "it's time the world sees the truth about David and Vanessa." And as Emily looked at the damning evidence, she realized the war Vanessa had started would end in a way neither of them expected. For days, the tabloids feasted on Vanessa's lies. Emily's name was dragged through the mud, her dignity questioned, her motives twisted. The chatter was relentless. Was she really the selfless mother Henry Blackwood praised, or just another gold digger in disguise? Emily stayed silent, her heart heavy. Every cruel headline reminded her of the helplessness she once felt when David discarded her. But this time she wasn't fighting alone. Henry Blackwood was not a man who tolerated injustice, especially against someone he had chosen to protect. On a crisp Thursday morning, Henry summoned reporters to the grand ballroom of the Blackwood Tower. Cameras lined the room, microphones pointed at the polished podium. Whispers filled the air. Everyone expected him to announce a new business merger or a political endorsement. Instead, Henry stepped forward, his expression carved from stone, Emily seated quietly in the front row. "Over the past week," he began, his deep voice echoing, "there have been malicious rumors targeting a woman of extraordinary character, Emily Carter. These lies were spread to destroy her reputation and distract from the truth. Tonight, I will reveal that truth." The room hushed. Screens flickered to life behind him, displaying documents, photos, and recordings. The first was a medical statement, signed by Emily's doctor, confirming her pregnancy 3 years ago and her refusal to terminate despite pressure. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Then came the voice recordings. David's voice filled the speakers, cold and cutting. "Get rid of it, Emily. Vanessa doesn't want baggage. Either you do it, or you're gone." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, their faces pale with shock. Henry's gaze swept the crowd. This is the man who abandoned his wife, who demanded she destroy not only her dignity, but her children's lives. This is the man whose mistress now spreads lies to hide his sins. Emily Carter is not a schemer. She is a survivor, and the only scandal here is the cruelty she endured at David Carter's hands. Emily felt her throat tighten as the room exploded with noise. For the first time, her pain wasn't a secret whispered in the dark. It was truth, undeniable and raw, projected for the world to see. Across the city, David watched the broadcast from his office, his face drained of color. Vanessa paced behind him, her fury boiling over. "How did he get those recordings?" she screamed. "This will ruin you, ruin us." David slammed his fist against the desk, but inside, panic clawed at him. Henry Blackwood had destroyed men far stronger than him with less. Now, his darkest moment was public record, his name already trending online with words like abuser and monster. Emily, meanwhile, sat frozen as the press swarmed Henry with questions. She hadn't wanted this much attention, hadn't wanted her pain to become headlines. But when Henry's hand touched hers, steady and sure, she realized something. The truth wasn't her shame. It was her weapon. That night, as news anchors replayed the damning recordings, public opinion shifted. Where once she had been slandered, now she was celebrated. A mother who fought for her children. A woman who stood against cruelty. But not everyone was celebrating. Because as Emily's star began to rise, David and Vanessa plotted in the shadows, more desperate than ever. And this time, they wouldn't just attack her reputation. They would go after her heart. The fallout from Henry Blackwood's press conference was immediate and brutal. Overnight, David Carter's name became poison. The recordings of him demanding Emily abort their child replayed across every news channel, dissected by talk show hosts, shared millions of times online. Hashtags trended relentlessly. Justice for Emily, Carter exposed, children over greed. Clients withdrew. Investors panicked. Within 48 hours, his company's stock plummeted. Board members, once eager to bask in his confidence, now avoided his calls. The man who had once strutted into meetings as if he owned the room was now shut out of his own empire. At the office, whispers followed him through the halls. Assistants who once scrambled to please him now stared with thinly veiled disgust. In the boardroom, his chief financial officer delivered the final blow. "David, we can't recover from this. The scandal has gutted investor trust. Unless we find a buyer, Carter Investments is finished." David slammed his fist on the table. "No one walks away from me. I built this company." But even as the words left his mouth, he saw the truth in their eyes. They weren't his anymore. Back at the penthouse, things were no better. Vanessa had turned into a storm of rage. She hurled crystal glasses against the wall, her voice dripping venom. "Do you realize what you've done? You've made me a laughingstock. People look at me and see a mistress who married a monster. Do you know what that does to my name, to my family?" David tried to soothe her, but his voice shook. "Vanessa, we can fix this. We just need time." "Time?" she spat. "You don't have time. You don't have money. And if Henry Blackwood keeps coming, you won't even have me." Her words sliced him open. For the first time, David felt the chill of true abandonment. The same abandonment he had forced on Emily. The spiral deepened. Reporters camped outside his building. Protesters held signs calling him a disgrace and child killer. Anonymous emails flooded his inbox, each one crueler than the last. Even his closest friends stopped answering his calls. One night, after too many whiskeys, David stared at his reflection in the mirror. His face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot. Gone was the polished, ambitious man who once believed he could conquer the world. In his place was a shell, unraveling thread by thread. And still, Emily haunted him. Every headline praising her strength was a dagger. Every image of her smiling with Henry and the twins was a reminder of what he had lost. Meanwhile, Emily moved forward. The literacy program she championed gained national attention. Donations poured in, inspired by her story. For every brick that fell from David's collapsing empire, Emily seemed to build a new foundation of her own. The irony was unbearable. Late one evening, David stumbled into the living room where Vanessa sat scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up. "Vanessa," he rasped, "we can't let her win. We have to fight back. I'll do anything." Finally, she lifted her gaze, her eyes cold and unfeeling. "Anything?" David nodded, desperation dripping from every pore. Vanessa leaned closer, her lips curling into a smile that sent a chill down his spine. "Then it's time we stop playing defense. If Emily wants a war, we'll give her one." And in that chilling moment, David realized his wife wasn't planning to save him. She was planning something far darker. The storm of scandal had reduced David Carter's empire to rubble. Within weeks, his company filed for bankruptcy. The board forced him out, stripping him of every title he once wore like armor. His penthouse, the crown jewel he flaunted, was placed on the market to cover debts. But the worst blow came not from Wall Street or the tabloids, it came from Vanessa. She had grown colder with each passing day, her contempt no longer hidden. Gone were the seductive whispers and the painted smiles at galas. Now she barely spoke to him, answering questions with curt one-word replies, her phone always in her hand. David found her one evening, lounging in silk pajamas, sipping champagne as if the world outside wasn't collapsing. "Vanessa," he said hoarsely, "we have to stick together. I need you now more than ever." She didn't even glance up from her phone. "You need me?" "David, I didn't marry you to play nursemaid to a failure. I married you because you were supposed to give me more. More status, more money, more power." She finally looked at him, her eyes sharp. "But now, you're nothing." His stomach twisted. "We can rebuild, with time, with strategy." She cut him off with a laugh, bitter and cruel. "Rebuild? You think anyone will trust you again? Your name is filth. The only thing you'll rebuild is a bar tab." David reached for her hand, desperation seeping into every word. "Please, Vanessa, don't leave me. You're all I have left." She yanked her hand away as if his touch burned her. "Don't be pathetic. Men like you are replaceable, and I already have someone who knows how to treat me like the woman I am." The words hit harder than any punch. David staggered, his chest heaving. You're seeing someone else?" Vanessa smiled coldly, setting her glass on the table. "Let's just say I don't waste time on sinking ships." She stood, smoothing her silk robe, and walked past him without another glance. Moments later, the slam of the door echoed through the empty penthouse. David sank to his knees, his hands clutching his head. The apartment around him, once a monument to his triumph, now felt like a tomb. Everything was gone. His company, his reputation, his marriage. And Emily. Emily stood taller than ever. Because while David crumbled, Emily's star continued to rise. With Henry at her side, she became the face of the Literacy Foundation, her story inspiring women across the country. She appeared on morning shows, speaking with quiet grace about resilience, motherhood, and second chances. Donations poured in, and her program expanded into schools nationwide. In one interview, when asked about the scandal, Emily didn't mention David's name. She simply said, "Pain can destroy you, or it can shape you into someone stronger. I chose the second." Her words trended within hours, shared across social media as a beacon of hope. And David watched it all from the shadows, drowning his shame in cheap whiskey. The woman he once cast aside as weak now stood as a symbol of strength, celebrated by the very society that had turned its back on him. One night, he stumbled to the window of his nearly empty penthouse, staring down at the glittering city below. His reflection in the glass was unrecognizable, a broken man, hollowed out by greed and regret. And as he whispered Emily's name into the darkness, he didn't realize that their paths were about to collide again, in a way that would leave him truly shattered. For years, Emily Carter had survived by building walls. Walls of silence, walls of fear, walls that kept her safe from the world that once destroyed her. She had mastered the art of holding herself together, smiling in public, speaking with grace, presenting strength. But inside, she carried wounds that no one could see. Henry Blackwood saw them. He had always seen them. In the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. In the way her smile faded the moment cameras turned away. In the way she never let anyone, not even him, get too close. That night, after another successful fundraiser where Emily spoke to hundreds with calm composure, Henry found her alone in the quiet of the townhouse. The twins were asleep upstairs, their soft breaths drifting through the baby monitor. Emily sat on the sofa, her gown still on, but her shoulders sagged, her hands covering her face. Henry approached carefully, his voice low. "You held yourself well tonight?" Everyone was moved. She dropped her hands slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "They see someone strong," she whispered, "but they don't know the truth." Henry frowned. "What truth?" "That sometimes," she said, her voice breaking, "I still feel like the woman he threw away, that I wasn't enough, that if I were stronger, smarter, richer, maybe he wouldn't have left me. Maybe he wouldn't have wanted me to." Her words caught, her chest heaving as the old memory surfaced. "Maybe he wouldn't have wanted me to destroy my children." The dam broke. Emily's sobs filled the room, raw and uncontrollable. She tried to cover her face again, ashamed of the vulnerability, but Henry knelt in front of her, gently pulling her hands away. "Don't hide from me," he said softly. "You don't have to." Her tears fell harder. "I'm so tired, Henry. Tired of being strong. Tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. I've carried this alone for so long." Henry's chest tightened. Without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms. She resisted at first, stiff and uncertain, but then she collapsed against him, her body trembling. He held her tightly, his hand cradling the back of her head, his voice steady in her ear. "You're not alone anymore," he murmured. "Not with me. Not with your girls. You never have to carry this by yourself again." They stayed like that for what felt like hours, her tears soaking his shirt, his embrace shielding her from every shadow of her past. For the first time since David's betrayal, Emily allowed herself to fall apart. And in falling apart, she began to heal. When her sobs finally quieted, she pulled back, her eyes swollen but lighter somehow. She searched Henry's face, as if trying to understand why he had chosen to stand by her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice fragile. Henry looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything. And because, Emily, I don't want to watch you stand on your own anymore. I want to stand with you." Her heart pounded. For years, she had promised herself never to trust a man again, never to give anyone the power to break her. But looking into Henry's eyes, she saw no greed, no selfishness, only sincerity and strength. Her lips parted, the words trembling on the edge of release. But before she could speak, a sharp knock echoed at the townhouse door, delivering news that would shatter the fragile peace she had just found. The world had watched Emily Carter's rise with awe. From the ashes of betrayal, she had become a symbol of resilience. Now society was about to witness her final transformation, not as the discarded wife of David Carter, but as the chosen bride of Henry Blackwood. The wedding was the event of the season. Invitations were coveted treasures, embossed in gold, bearing the Blackwood family crest. Guests arrived in chauffeured cars, lining the grand cathedral steps with glittering gowns and tuxedos. The press camped outside, flashes erupting like fireworks. Inside, the cathedral glowed with candlelight, every pew filled with the city's elite. White roses cascaded down marble pillars, their fragrance mingling with the sacred hush. At the altar stood Henry, the man once feared as the Iron Wolf, his steel demeanor softened by anticipation. And then the music began. Emily appeared at the entrance, her twins walking beside her as flower girls, their tiny hands clutching baskets of petals. The guests gasped. She was radiant, her gown simple but breathtaking, ivory silk that shimmered under the light, a veil trailing behind like a river of hope. For once, she didn't lower her eyes. She walked with her head high, her daughters by her side, her heart steady. As she approached, Henry's gaze never left her. When she reached him, he whispered, "Just for her, you've never looked stronger." The ceremony unfolded in reverent silence. The priest spoke of faith, endurance, and love reborn from hardship. Emily's hands trembled only once when Henry slid the ring onto her finger, but his touch steadied her. When it was her turn, her voice rang clear, her vows carrying the weight of every trial she had survived. "I once believed love was weakness," she said softly, her eyes shining. "But now I know true love is strength, the kind that heals, the kind that protects, the kind that never abandons. Henry, you've shown me that, and today I choose you." Tears glistened in the eyes of many guests. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Henry drew Emily into his arms, sealing their vows with a kiss that thundered with applause. The twins clapped joyfully, tossing the last of their petals into the air. Outside, the city buzzed. News anchors hailed it as a wedding of redemption, a fairy tale come true. Social media overflowed with admiration. Emily and Henry, love after betrayal, stronger together. But not everyone celebrated. From a shadowed corner of the cathedral, David watched. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, but his gaze was fixed on Emily with an intensity that bordered on madness. He clenched the back of a pew until his knuckles turned white. Beside him, Vanessa slipped in late, her lips curved in a bitter smile. She leaned close to David, whispering, "So this is what she's become, untouchable. But don't worry, darling, even queens can fall." David said nothing, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with equal parts longing and rage. The woman he had discarded had risen higher than he could ever reach. And yet, watching her in Henry's arms, he felt something shift inside, a dangerous blend of regret and obsession. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle to thunderous applause, Emily's veil trailing behind her, a chill swept through the cathedral. She didn't see the eyes watching her from the shadows, the silent vow forming on David's lips. Because even as Emily embraced her new beginning, danger lurked, her past refusing to release its grip, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The weeks after Emily and Henry's wedding were filled with celebration. Their photos graced magazine covers, their story hailed as a tale of resilience and love. Emily was invited to speak at universities, interviewed on national television, her quiet strength inspiring millions. The Literacy Foundation expanded beyond New York, opening branches across the country. Everywhere she went, people applauded her as a symbol of hope. Meanwhile, David Carter became a ghost. His bankruptcy left him penniless, stripped of the penthouse and the company that once bore his name. Former allies crossed the street to avoid him. Restaurants that once fought for his reservation now turned him away. Even the doormen who used to nod with respect now sneered when he passed. His reputation was toxic. No firm would hire him, no investor would trust him. The man who once dreamed of controlling Wall Street now begged for meetings that never came. Each rejection was another nail in the coffin of the life he once believed was unshakable. At night, he drowned his shame in cheap liquor, stumbling through dimly lit bars where no one recognized him, or worse, where they did, and whispered behind his back. Vanessa, true to her word, abandoned him completely. She vanished into the arms of another wealthy suitor, her name scrubbed clean by her family's money. David was left alone. One rainy evening, he found himself outside the very shelter where Emily had once stayed. He stared at the peeling paint, the broken steps, and for the first time, he understood the depth of the hell he had forced her into. The irony stung. He had once mocked her for being weak, but now he stood in the same shadows, broken, forgotten, desperate. Inside his pocket, he still carried a folded photo he had torn from a magazine. Emily smiling, Henry's arm around her, their daughters laughing. He stared at it often, his hands trembling, torn between regret and resentment. She had built a life from ashes. He had turned his into dust. The final blow came when federal investigators launched a probe into his past dealings. Old financial crimes resurfaced: fraud, embezzlement, insider trading. The very shortcuts he once used to climb had become chains dragging him down. One morning, agents arrived at his dingy apartment. The neighbors watched as David Carter, once a man of tailored suits and champagne dreams, was escorted away in handcuffs. The headlines were merciless. From banker to beggar, David Carter arrested in financial scandal. His mugshot went viral, his hollow eyes and unshaven face a cruel contrast to the polished image he once projected. In the comfort of her home, Emily read the news quietly. For a long moment she felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Just a strange, heavy pity. The man who had once crushed her had now destroyed himself. Henry noticed the sadness in her eyes and touched her hand. He made his choices, Emily. You made yours. That's the difference. She nodded, her gaze drifting to her daughters playing on the carpet. Their laughter filled the room, warm and innocent. Emily realized she had no reason to look back anymore. Her life was here, with them, with Henry, with the future she had fought so hard to protect. And yet, far away, in the shadows of a prison cell, David whispered her name with a twisted mix of love and hate. Because though his world had ended, he swore he wasn't finished, and Emily's final test was still to come. The news of David Carter's downfall spread like wildfire. His name, once spoken in the halls of finance with envy, now became a cautionary tale whispered with disdain. Ambition without conscience destroys, the headlines declared. His arrest sealed the fate he had carved for himself. Emily Carter, however, was living a different story, one not of destruction, but of rebirth. Weeks after David's sentencing, Emily stood before an auditorium filled with women from every walk of life. Some were students, some mothers, some survivors of their own private wars. The air buzzed with anticipation as she approached the podium. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward, but Emily didn't tremble. Not anymore. Her daughters sat in the front row beside Henry, their faces bright with pride. Emily took a deep breath, her voice steady as it carried through the hall. I once thought my life had ended, she began, when the person I trusted most betrayed me, when I was left with nothing, when I was told my children didn't deserve to exist. I thought I would never rise again. But I was wrong. The room was silent, every ear straining for her words. I learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing again, even when the world tells you to stay down. I stand here today not because I am extraordinary, but because I refused to let cruelty define me, and because I had people who believed in me when I no longer believed in myself. Her gaze found Henry, whose eyes softened with pride. Then she looked back at the women before her. To every woman in this room, to every mother, to every survivor, you are stronger than you know. Don't let anyone tell you your worth depends on them. You are enough, and you can rise. Applause thundered through the auditorium, some women wiping away tears. It was more than a speech. It was a release, a healing for those who had carried their own scars in silence. In the weeks that followed, Emily's foundation grew into a national movement. Schools across the country adopted her literacy programs. Survivors of abuse and betrayal wrote letters thanking her for giving them hope. She had become not just a mother, not just a wife, but a voice for countless women who had been silenced. Meanwhile, David's story faded into obscurity. Locked in a prison cell, his name became nothing more than a footnote in Emily's legacy. Vanessa, ever the opportunist, vanished into another man's world, her relevance quickly forgotten. Emily no longer looked back. She didn't need revenge. Life had delivered justice in its own way. On a quiet evening, she sat on the balcony of her home, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold. Henry joined her, his hand warm against hers. The twins played in the garden below, their laughter floating upward like music. "Do you ever think about him?" Henry asked softly. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she shook her head. "No, he's part of my past, but my future is right here." Henry kissed her forehead, and for the first time in years, Emily felt whole. She had walked through fire and come out not burned, but shining. As the last light of day faded, Emily whispered words that carried far beyond her own heart. "No woman is weak, not when she chooses to rise." And with that, her story was no longer one of pain, it was one of victory, healing, and unshakable hope. So that's how our story comes to an end. My dear friends, you're still here, aren't you? If you've stayed with me until now, it means something in this journey touched your heart in its own quiet way. And maybe, just maybe, this isn't just Emily's story, it's also a reminder for you. Life breaks us, sometimes in the cruelest ways. People betray us, dreams collapse, storms hit when we least expect them. But as the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Emily's journey wasn't about erasing her pain, it was about transforming it into power. And that's the truth for all of us. We can't always control what happens, but we can choose how we rise. Healing is possible. Dignity can be rebuilt. Love and trust can return when we believe we deserve them. If this story reached you, if it sparked even the smallest light inside, then I invite you to share it with someone who might need it too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our community, because here we rise together. The rain hammered down on the city streets that night, each drop echoing the sound of a heart being torn apart. Inside a dimly lit apartment, Emily Carter stood frozen, her trembling hands clutching the pregnancy report she had hoped would bring joy. Instead, it became her death sentence. David, her husband, the man she had sacrificed everything for, stood before her with a cruel smirk. "Get rid of it," he spat, his voice cold, sharp like a knife cutting into her soul. "Vanessa doesn't want any baggage when I marry her. You understand, Emily? This baby has no place in my future." Emily's lips quivered, her tears streaming down like rivers. "David, this is our child," she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of betrayal. Her body shook, her heart begged for mercy, but his eyes were merciless, hardened with ambition and poisoned by lust for another woman. He stepped closer, towering over her. "Don't play the victim. You were always weak, Emily, always holding me back. Vanessa is everything you're not, beautiful, wealthy, powerful, and she'll make me the man I deserve to be. So listen carefully, either you get rid of it, or I'll throw you out tonight." Her knees buckled. The man she once believed was her forever was now her executioner. She begged with all the love still clinging inside her chest. "Please, David, don't make me do this. Please." But he turned away, already slipping on his tailored jacket, his phone buzzing with a message from Vanessa. He didn't even glance back. "You have until tomorrow. After that, you're gone." The door slammed shut, leaving Emily shattered on the cold wooden floor. She pressed her hands against her belly, sobbing silently. Inside her, the tiny heartbeat of life gave her the only comfort left. She knew then she couldn't destroy it. No matter what David wanted, she would protect her child. But she had no money, no family close enough to help, no safety net. Just a fragile body, a broken heart, and a cruel storm waiting outside. With nothing but a suitcase and her unborn child, Emily stepped into the rain, her tears blending with the storm as the city swallowed her whole. That night, something inside Emily died, but something stronger was born. 3 years later, the world would see her again, but not as the broken woman David threw away. She would return, radiant and untouchable, stepping out of a limousine with twins at her side and the arm of a millionaire wrapped around her. And when David's eyes met hers across a glittering ballroom, his world would collapse. Because the woman he tried to destroy had risen higher than he ever dreamed, and she was coming back for everything he stole. Before betrayal shattered her world, Emily Carter had been the kind of woman everyone overlooked. At 28, she lived a modest life in a small New York apartment. Her days were filled with chalk dust and children's laughter. She was a beloved elementary school teacher who poured her heart into her students. She didn't crave wealth or power. All she wanted was love, stability, and a family she could call her own. Her past had been marked by quiet struggle. Raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse, Emily knew hardship. She remembered nights when dinner was nothing more than canned soup, and mornings when her mother went to work with tired eyes, but an unbreakable smile. That strength was the foundation Emily carried, even though she often doubted herself. When David Carter walked into her life, Emily thought her prayers had been answered. He was handsome, ambitious, with a charm that seemed impossible to resist. She met him at a community fundraiser where she was volunteering. He had this way of making her feel seen, as if the rest of the room disappeared whenever he looked at her. For a woman who had spent most of her life blending into the background, that attention was intoxicating. They married quickly. Too quickly. Her friends had warned. But Emily believed in fairy tales. She believed love could erase differences in ambition and class. She believed David's sweet words when he promised to take care of her forever. In her heart, she was certain he loved her not for what she had, but for who she was. The cracks began to show almost immediately. David hated their small apartment, calling it a shoebox. He complained about her salary, sneering that teaching children was a hobby, not a career. When she worked late grading papers, he mocked her dedication. But Emily, eager to prove herself, kept quiet. She told herself marriage was about compromise, about patience. Then came the pregnancy. For Emily, it was a miracle. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother, of building the family she never had. When she held the test in her trembling hands, she smiled through tears, imagining David's joy. She pictured decorating a nursery, buying tiny shoes, feeling his hand resting on her swollen belly as they planned their future together. But David's reaction was a dagger through her dreams. He didn't smile, he didn't hug her. Instead, his face darkened, his voice dripping with irritation. "This wasn't the plan, Emily. Do you think I can build a future with a screaming baby tying me down?" From that moment, the man she thought she knew began to vanish. His words grew sharper. His late nights out multiplied. The smell of expensive perfume clung to his suits, perfume that wasn't hers. When she asked gentle questions, he exploded in anger. And then the ultimate cruelty. His demand that she end her pregnancy to clear the path for Vanessa, the wealthy woman who promised him the life he thought he deserved. Emily was trapped. She had no savings, no powerful family, no safety net. Every night she lay awake, clutching her belly, praying for strength. She remembered her mother's sacrifices and whispered to her unborn child, "I'll protect you, even if it kills me." And it nearly did. Because one stormy night, David forced her out of their home with nothing but a suitcase, a heart full of pain, and a life growing inside her. What Emily didn't know was that this exile wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning of a transformation that would one day make her unrecognizable to the man who betrayed her. The first weeks after David cast her out were the darkest days of Emily's life. She wandered the streets with a suitcase that held all she could carry, some clothes, a few books, and the ultrasound photo she clutched like a lifeline. Her body ached, her spirit was broken, and every night she wondered if she and her unborn child would survive another day. Emily found temporary shelter in a cramped women's refuge on the edge of Brooklyn. The peeling paint and creaking floors were a far cry from the life she once imagined, but at least it offered a roof and warmth. There she learned what desperation truly felt like. She shared space with women who had escaped violence, addiction, and abandonment. Each night, their whispered stories of pain mingled with her own silent sobs. Her teaching job was gone. David had seen to that by whispering lies to the school board about her mental instability. With no income, Emily scraped by, taking odd jobs tutoring children in the neighborhood and cleaning offices late into the night. Pregnancy made everything harder. Her back ached, her ankles swelled, and her body screamed for rest she couldn't afford. But through it all, she whispered to her unborn baby, "Hold on. Mommy will find a way." One frigid evening, after finishing a cleaning shift, Emily nearly collapsed on the sidewalk. The icy wind cut through her thin coat, and dizziness blurred her vision. Her knees buckled, and she clutched her belly in panic. Just as she was about to fall, a strong pair of hands caught her. "Easy there," a deep voice said. Emily blinked up to see a tall man with piercing gray eyes and a face she vaguely recognized from newspapers. His tailored coat, leather gloves, and polished shoes screamed wealth, a world far beyond her reach. He guided her to a nearby black car waiting at the curb. "I'm fine," Emily whispered, embarrassed, but the man studied her pale face and trembling hands with concern. "You're pregnant," he said firmly, "and you're freezing. You're not fine." That man was Henry Blackwood, a billionaire CEO known for his ruthless business sense and cold demeanor. The press called him the Iron Wolf of Wall Street. But in that moment, he wasn't ruthless. He was simply a stranger, unwilling to let a fragile woman collapse in the street. Against her protests, Henry insisted on taking her to a private clinic. While Emily rested, he stood outside the room, strangely unsettled. Something about her vulnerability gnawed at him. He had built empires, crushed rivals, and commanded boardrooms filled with the world's most powerful men. Yet here was a woman with nothing, no wealth, no status, and somehow she radiated a quiet strength he couldn't ignore. When Emily awoke, Henry was waiting. She tried to thank him and leave, but he stopped her. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" he asked. Her silence was answer enough. Henry leaned back in his chair studying her. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he murmured. "Someone who fought the world alone. She didn't make it." His gaze sharpened. "I won't watch history repeat itself. Not if I can help it." Emily frowned, uncertain of his intentions. She didn't trust easily anymore, not after David's betrayal. And yet, something in Henry's voice, something almost broken, made her pause. Because in that moment, without realizing it, Emily's path had crossed with the man who would one day change her life forever. Emily never planned to step into Henry Blackwood's world. At first, she resisted his offers, too proud to accept charity. But Henry was relentless in his quiet, calculating way. He arranged safe housing for her in one of his lesser-known properties, a modest but elegant townhouse far from the chaos of the city center. "Think of it as a loan," he said, "not a gift. One day, you can repay me." Emily wanted to believe it was just kindness, but she knew men like Henry didn't act without reason. Still, for the first time in months, she had a warm bed, proper meals, and prenatal care. She clutched her belly, whispering to her unborn child, "We're safe now, at least for tonight." As weeks turned into months, Emily slowly adjusted to her new life. Henry, though often absent, arranged everything with military precision. A private doctor visited weekly. Fresh groceries appeared at her door. When she asked who managed it all, the answer was always the same: Mr. Blackwood's staff. Yet Emily never felt like a pampered guest. She cooked her own meals, cleaned her own space, and avoided the luxury surrounding her. She didn't want to depend on anyone, especially not a man. Her scars from David's betrayal still burned too deeply. Henry, however, was a puzzle she couldn't solve. He would drop by unannounced, dressed in sharp suits, his presence filling the room. He asked about her health with a detached tone, but his eyes lingered on her with something unspoken. Sometimes she caught a flicker of pain in his gaze, as if her struggle mirrored something buried in his past. One evening, he invited her to dinner at his mansion, a sprawling estate perched on the edge of the Hudson River. Emily hesitated, but eventually agreed, curious about the man who had saved her life. The mansion stunned her. Marble floors stretched endlessly, chandeliers glimmered overhead, and walls were lined with priceless art. She felt small, out of place, as if she had stumbled into another universe. Her simple dress and worn shoes looked almost shameful in such grandeur. At the long dining table, Henry sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "You don't belong in the gutter, Emily," he said bluntly. "You're stronger than you think. You just need someone to remind you." His words cut deep. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even David. For a fleeting moment, she saw herself through Henry's eyes. Not a broken woman, but a survivor. After dinner, Henry gave her a simple task. "I want you to help with one of my charity projects. It's for underprivileged children. You used to be a teacher. You can make a difference." Emily froze. The thought of stepping back into society terrified her. What if people discovered her past? What if David found her? Her hands trembled, but Henry's voice was steady. Hiding won't heal you. The world already tried to bury you. Don't let it succeed. That night, Emily lay awake in the townhouse, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, she wondered if Henry's world wasn't a trap, but a chance. An invitation to become someone stronger than the woman David had tried to destroy. But Emily didn't know that stepping into Henry's world would set off a chain of events leading her straight back into David's orbit and into a confrontation she wasn't ready for.
Welcome to our channel, where we bring you dramatic and heartfelt stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. In this riveting tale, the most jaw-dropping moment occurs when our courageous heroine makes a life-altering decision right after her millionaire husband parades his mistress at her own birthday celebration. Imagine the tension and heartache in that final scene. Will she walk away for good, or can their relationship be salvaged amidst the betrayal? Curious about how it all ends? Be sure to listen to the full story to discover the fate of everyone involved, including a surprise twist that may forever redefine their futures. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories like this. We'd love to hear your personal thoughts, so leave a comment sharing what you think the outcome should be. And remember, you can tune in right here to follow every turn of these enthralling events. Estelle Carter Kingsley was born into a world of polished marble floors and shining chandeliers, where every social function felt like a grand event. Her father, Anders Carter, hailed from a prestigious line of financiers whose strategic investments spanned continents. From a young age, Estelle learned the art of subtlety, how to speak softly yet command attention, how to shine without outshining those around her, and how to navigate the currents of high society with ease. She spent much of her childhood attending charity galas with her father, admiring paintings in renowned museums across Europe, and studying in some of the finest boarding schools. Over time, her poise and discerning mind became legendary within their elite social circles, a testament to her upbringing and her own quiet determination. When Estelle first met Donovan Kingsley, a charismatic millionaire with an empire built on tech innovations, real estate ventures, and philanthropic missions, she believed she had encountered someone who shared her aspiration to make the world a better place. Donovan was no ordinary businessman. He exuded a certain magnetism that pulled people into his orbit, made them trust him, and left them eager to be part of whatever project he championed next. He had founded Kingsley Holdings, a sprawling conglomerate with an impressive portfolio. Cutting-edge artificial intelligence labs, modern architecture developments dotting major capitals, and even environmentally sustainable initiatives that had drawn praise from international leaders. Everyone saw him as the man who could balance massive profit with moral responsibility, a rare combination in a fiercely competitive world. Estelle was captivated by Donovan's enthusiasm for progress, while he was charmed by her nuanced understanding of culture and history. Their whirlwind romance became the talk of Manhattan's high society. It was a relationship seemingly blessed by the city's most influential figures. Politicians attended their engagement party, philanthropic icons toasted to their future, and the press lauded them as the philanthropic power couple who could shape the next decade. Their union promised more than just a merger of wealth. It symbolized a partnership of ambition and empathy, something that felt refreshingly uncontrived in a world of carefully managed images. During the early years of their marriage, Estelle and Donovan were indeed unstoppable. They stood together at glamorous charity events, raising millions of dollars for children's art programs and hospital expansions. They traveled extensively, forging international connections to broaden the reach of Kingsley Holdings. Behind closed doors, they spent late nights discussing strategies for blending profit with altruism, brainstorming ways to extend goodwill beyond cursory donation checks. The synergy was real, and observers predicted a golden future for them both. But glitz and good intentions often mask fault lines. As Donovan's business empire expanded, so did his appetite for risk and adventure. He delighted in corporate acquisitions, negotiating multinational deals, and launching new ventures at a frenetic pace. Estelle, though supportive, found herself increasingly sidelined, reduced to cameo appearances at pivotal functions, where her presence added credibility but not necessarily input. The decline in their personal connection began as a faint, discordant note. A dinner missed here, a quick goodbye replaced by a distracted phone call there. Over time, it grew into a glaring rupture. Donovan's need for excitement, fueled by his ever-growing sense of invincibility, started edging out the sincere devotion that once made their relationship so special. When Estelle discovered she was pregnant, she believed it might be the unifying event that would restore their intimacy. Little did she know that Donovan had already embarked on another venture entirely, a clandestine liaison that threatened to unravel everything she held dear. The night of Estelle's birthday celebration arrived with grand fanfare. Tall, wrought-iron gates opened to reveal a winding driveway lined with trees, illuminated by soft golden lights. Rumor had it Donovan had spared no expense. He wanted the atmosphere to feel almost like a royal reception. Luxury cars formed a slow-moving procession, delivering guests onto a red-carpeted path. Inside the palatial Kingsley estate, an army of waitstaff hurried with meticulously arranged trays of champagne flutes, while a quartet gently serenaded the arrivals with classical tunes. The main ballroom boasted floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's sparkling skyline, an opulent setting that shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers and carefully placed floral centerpieces bursting with white orchids. Estelle was dressed in a flowing gown of lavender silk, its subtle drapery designed to camouflage the gentle curve of her midsection. She had not yet publicly revealed her pregnancy, eager to make a graceful announcement during the evening's toasts. A quiet excitement kept her heart fluttering. Surrounded by the hum of polite laughter and witty conversation, she felt optimistic that Donovan would seize the moment to reconnect with her. Her father, Anders, stood near her, meticulously greeting political figures, philanthropic leaders, and old money families who had supported their lineage for decades. The air was full of promise, scented by delicate honeysuckle candles and the buoyant potential that her child, perhaps the future heir to Kingsley Holdings, represented. As she welcomed acquaintances and dear friends, Estelle felt a small thrill at every mention of her rumored glow. Some noticed she was radiantly happy, others teased that Donovan had better be prepared for fatherhood. She merely smiled and hinted that good news might soon be shared. In her mind, she had already rehearsed the short speech she would give, something understated yet heartfelt about becoming a mother and hoping that the next generation could inherit not just financial security, but a true commitment to humanitarian causes. Then only an hour into the evening, a ripple of hushed fascination coursed through the crowd like an unexpected gust of wind. Donovan had arrived, but he wasn't alone. On his arm was a striking figure, a woman in a scarlet gown that hugged her every curve. Her glossy hair fell in waves around a face that radiated a calculated confidence. Most of the guests had never seen her before, but some recognized her from a handful of Donovan's smaller business events or from social media whispers. Her name was Lucia DeMarco, a marketing consultant whose creativity and flair had, according to rumors, rekindled Donovan's zest for adventure, both in and out of the boardroom. A hush gripped the assembly as Donovan and Lucia walked through the main hall, the taps of her expensive heels echoing in a space too suddenly quiet. Estelle, standing by a polished marble pillar with her father, locked eyes with Donovan from across the room. The unspoken horror in her gaze demanded an explanation. "Why are you doing this to me, and on my birthday?" She battled the sudden sting of tears, steeling herself. Estelle's emotional training and social graces kicked in like a reflex. Straighten your shoulders, keep your composure, and do not let them see you falter. Meanwhile, Lucia's expression betrayed neither remorse nor discomfort, only a self-assured smile suggesting she felt entitled to be there. For Estelle, a seed of disbelief mingled with fury. Tonight was meant to be her triumphant moment, one celebrating both her life and the life growing inside her. Donovan had turned it into a scandalous spectacle. In a display of nerve that bordered on brazen, Donovan drew Lucia forward, cutting through clusters of guests who parted instinctively to watch the unfolding drama. He exuded the same poised confidence he displayed at global conferences, the kind that usually reassured anxious investors. Except this time, he wasn't pitching a new product or seeking capital. He was walking into a social battlefield of his own making, accompanied by the very person rumored to be his mistress. Estelle's father, Anders, quickly placed a steadying hand on her arm. "My dear, you don't need to face him if you're not ready," he whispered, his voice resonating with paternal protectiveness. But Estelle, summoning the grace she had been raised with, refused to run. She stepped forward calmly, holding her flute of sparkling water as if it were a prop in a play she had not agreed to star in. When Donovan finally reached her side, a frigid tension enveloped the room. Several distinguished guests feigned polite conversation in the background, but their eyes never stopped monitoring the trio. "Happy birthday, Estelle," Donovan said, leaning in to plant a perfunctory kiss on her cheek. The gesture held none of the warmth of years past. Lucia stood inches behind him, a living testament to the brazen disregard for his wife's dignity. Estelle, forcing a tight smile, replied, "Thank you for attending." It was an ice-cold retort, especially from someone whose usual greetings brimmed with warmth and sincerity. To those observing, the entire exchange felt surreal, like a climactic twist in a stage play. Some noble families and business moguls shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to publicly snub Donovan Kingsley, but equally hesitant to show approval for such blatant disrespect. Others, perpetually hungry for salacious gossip, hovered close enough to catch every nuance. Lucia offered her hand to Estelle. "It's wonderful to finally meet you," she said, her tone polite but laced with unspoken bravado. Estelle could barely utter a response. Even as she maintained a veneer of civility, a roiling tide of anger and humiliation throbbed inside her. She felt the faint swirl of her child's movement, a poignant reminder that she was responsible for another life now, one that had just been thrust into a scandal not of its own making. Sensing the escalating tension, Anders Carter raised his glass, skillfully redirecting everyone's focus. "A toast," he announced, beckoning the crowd toward the massive dining room set with flickering candles and silverware, polished to an impeccable sheen. Staffers began quietly ushering guests into the next segment of the evening. Through the clinking of glassware and the low hum of whispered astonishment, Estelle felt an urgent need to steady herself. She knew she still had her big announcement to make. Would Donovan ruin that too? She inhaled deeply, reminding herself that the new life growing inside her deserved a mother who could rise above this madness. In mere moments, the birthday dinner took on an odd duality. Everything appeared polished, orchestrated, and elegant, yet the emotional undercurrent was one of shock and impending confrontation. Under different circumstances, this gathering would have been a resounding success, a shining beacon in Manhattan's social calendar. Now it felt like a grand stage for Donovan's betrayal and Estelle's heartbreak. The real question was whether the heartbreak would break her or galvanize her into someone unstoppable. Dinner proceeded in a swirl of sumptuous courses served by discreet waitstaff in crisp uniforms. White-gloved hands poured vintage wine for the guests, but Estelle declined any alcohol, opting instead for water, a necessity given her pregnancy. She found herself seated at the head table, flanked by her father and Donovan. Lucia, uncomfortably close, occupied the seat next to Donovan. Thus arranged, the dining experience became an involuntary drama for Estelle, as if each silver platter unveiled not just gourmet delicacies, but fresh waves of emotional turmoil. Between courses, Anders stood to deliver his birthday toast. He began with a sense of pride that momentarily restored dignity to the evening. "My daughter has always been a source of great joy," he said. He recounted stories of Estelle's childhood, her fascination with Renaissance art, her habit of sketching elaborate pictures instead of doodling in her notebooks, and her unwavering empathy that led her to volunteer in shelters even as a teenager. "And in marrying Donovan Kingsley, I believed she had found someone who shared her commitment to the greater good." Though unspoken, everyone in the room could sense Anders's frustration, especially given the present circumstances. Still, he soldiered on. "So please, raise your glass to Estelle, a brilliant mind, a gentle soul, and a daughter who continues to inspire me." Warm applause rippled across the tables, and Estelle rose to address the attendees. She felt an electric tension creeping along her spine, but refused to buckle under its pressure. "Thank you, Father, and thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight." She paused, glancing for a fraction of a second at Donovan, whose expression was unreadable. "I have a bit of news," she continued, voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. "Donovan and I are expecting our first child." A collective gasp followed her statement. The significance was not lost on anyone. Rumors of a rift between her and Donovan had floated around, and here was a revelation that should have united them in celebration. Donovan mustered a forced smile and reached over, brushing a quick kiss on Estelle's cheek. To outsiders, it looked vaguely supportive, but to Estelle, It felt like a hollow performance. "Congratulations," piped up a few well-wishers. Applause returned, along with a round of congratulatory remarks. Yet Estelle could see that Donovan's attention was drifting. His posture was tense, and he seemed more focused on controlling the damage to his image than sharing in the genuine thrill of becoming a father. Lucia, seated just a few chairs away, maintained a serene composure. She neither displayed envy nor remorse, as if her relationship with Donovan existed in a separate realm where Estelle's pregnancy was merely a footnote. Dessert came, a towering cake layered with dark chocolate and edible gold flakes, but the sweet indulgence couldn't mask the bitter tension. Estelle's heart pounded each time Donovan leaned over to whisper something to Lucia. Though they tried to appear discreet, the discreetness only magnified the impropriety in everyone's eyes. Still, Estelle told herself that no matter Donovan's betrayals, her child was her priority, and she would ensure that nothing overshadowed that new life. Deep inside, she began to sense a rising determination, a quiet certainty that if Donovan refused to honor his commitments, she would find a way forward alone, with her head held high. By the time the meal ended, many guests had retreated to quieter corners, murmuring about the scandal. Some drifted home early to avoid the awkwardness, while others lingered to glean more details or offer private words of support to Estelle. Deciding she needed a moment of clarity, Estelle excused herself and made her way to the estate's lavish gardens, her heart pounding in a conflicting mix of sorrow and emboldened resolve. Outside, lanterns cast gentle halos onto manicured hedges and marble statues. Tiny pathways meandered through rose bushes and around a tranquil pond. Estelle inhaled the cool night air, trying to steady herself. She considered calling out Donovan, demanding an explanation, but a part of her worried that a public confrontation might worsen matters. Then, as if summoned by her thoughts, Lucia stepped into the garden, wearing her radiant red gown like a challenge. "So, you followed him," Estelle said, her voice taut with tension. "Why come to my birthday celebration on his arm?" Lucia answered calmly, flipping a lock of dark hair behind her shoulder. Donovan insisted. He felt it was time to bring our association into the open. Her tone was neither apologetic nor hostile, just factual, as though she were explaining a business strategy. Estelle's stomach churned. She placed one protective hand over her abdomen, recalling the unborn child who needed her strength more than ever. "Does it bother you," she pressed, "knowing you're with a married man whose wife is pregnant?" Lucia gave a half shrug, her jeweled earrings glimmering in the garden's soft lighting. "I won't pretend this is ideal, but Donovan said your marriage was effectively over. I didn't realize you were expecting until recently, and even then, it's not my place to judge him." The detached finality in her words, the unwavering conviction that she was in the right, sent a wave of anger through Estelle. Before Estelle could lash out, Anders appeared, his brow furrowed with concern. "I think we've had enough of this evening's theatrics," he said pointedly, looking at Lucia with barely concealed disapproval. In that moment, the fatherly warmth Estelle had always counted on surrounded her once more. "Come, my dear," he said to Estelle. "Let's leave this for another time." Lucia, sensing that she was outmatched, nodded politely and disappeared back into the estate. In that moonlit garden, Estelle felt both the weight of the situation and an unexpectedly fierce determination building inside her. She wasn't just a wife dealing with betrayal. She was soon to be a mother, responsible for safeguarding the future of her child. No matter how humiliating Donovan's actions were, she refused to let him rob her of her dignity. Arm in arm with her father, Estelle returned indoors. She knew she had to confront Donovan eventually, probably sooner rather than later, but she wanted the setting to be on her own terms. For the rest of the night, she maintained a brave face, speaking graciously to the remaining guests and thanking them for attending. With each shallow courtesy, her decision crystallized. If Donovan would not be a partner, she would forge a life that served her unborn child's interests above everything else. And that life might no longer include him. Estelle woke the next morning to the muffled clamor of reporters at the gates. Overnight, the scandal had burst into public view. Photographs of Donovan arriving with Lucia on Estelle's birthday were plastered across tabloids and social media, accompanied by sensational headlines like "Millionaire husband flaunts mistress at pregnant wife's party." Camera crews aimed their lenses at passing cars, hoping for a single glimpse of the woman whose heartbreak had become a feeding frenzy. Estelle felt her stomach churn with nausea, partly from her pregnancy, but mostly from the staggering intrusiveness into her private life. Her father, Anders, had already marshaled the estate's staff to keep the gates closed and politely but firmly turn away any uninvited visitors. Her phone buzzed incessantly with texts, some from well-intentioned friends offering consolation, others from gossip-hungry acquaintances fishing for details. Feeling cornered, Estelle realized she had to respond in some manner, not only to salvage her reputation, but also to protect her unborn child. She called her longtime attorney, Margaret Lee, a seasoned professional with a reputation for handling high-stakes family law cases. "I need to know my rights," Estelle said, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. "I'm pregnant, and Donovan is openly disrespecting me. I won't let him twist the story." Margaret arrived by midday, discreetly parking at a side entrance. Over tea in the manor's sunlit study, they pored over the prenuptial agreement Estelle had signed. Crafted when love seemed everlasting, it contained provisions for asset division and spousal support, but had no specific clauses covering a scenario like a public affair while she was carrying Donovan's child. "We can file for divorce on grounds of adultery," Margaret explained, tapping a polished fingernail against the document. "Or we can negotiate a settlement outside of court, but I suspect Donovan won't play fair given his current mindset." Estelle nodded, pressing her palm against the gentle curve of her belly. "I want to provide a stable future for my baby," she said softly. "No matter what strategy we choose, that has to be the priority." Just the thought of her unborn child, innocent and unaware of the swirling scandal, gave Estelle renewed clarity. She wasn't simply a scorned wife. She was about to become a mother, and that role superseded all else. Meanwhile, Donovan was in damage control mode across town at Kingsley Holdings. From the 50th floor of his sleek corporate tower, he juggled calls from board members, PR consultants, and even frantic department heads worried about the company's public image. Stocks had dipped slightly after the headlines, and rumors circulated that some foreign investors were reconsidering deals with Kingsley Holdings. Donovan barked orders, making it clear he needed urgent solutions. "Release a statement that we're handling personal matters privately," he told his communication officer. "Emphasize that none of this affects our business endeavors." Yet behind his frustrated tone, a flicker of panic flared. He saw how swiftly a personal scandal could tarnish the empire he'd spent years building. Perhaps he had taken his legendary aura of control for granted. That afternoon, Estelle decided to address the media briefly. She emerged from the manor in a demure yet stately dress, her father by her side. Flashes from cameras hit her like a tidal wave. She spoke calmly, stating that she would be focusing on her health and her baby's well-being, and that any formal announcements would come through her lawyer. Those few lines, delivered with graceful composure, generated even more curiosity. With that, Estelle retreated, shutting out the flashes and clamor. She had taken the first step to steer the narrative. Next, she would plan her exit from a marriage that felt irreparably broken. In the week that followed, Estelle's days were a tumult of legal meetings, media inquiries, and private introspection. She was grateful for the staff who secured the estate, ensuring she wasn't harassed around the clock by paparazzi. Anders provided emotional support, reassuring her that no matter the legal complexities, she had a family that would stand by her. Meanwhile, Margaret prepared preliminary divorce documents, anticipating the need to protect Estelle from Donovan's lawyers, who could claim anything from mental instability due to pregnancy to mismanagement of household finances. Within the estate's ornate walls, Estelle carved out moments of serenity. She used spare hours to work on a new philanthropic project, a children's art initiative. She had always dreamed of establishing an art scholarship fund, providing resources for aspiring young talents who lacked the means to pursue their passion. Planning it became her emotional anchor. Whenever fear or anger threatened to overwhelm her, she refocused on something tangible, something beneficial that she could leave for the next generation, her child's generation. It reminded her that life extended beyond the immediate drama, that there was a future to nurture. Donovan's behavior in the media wavered between damage control and outright deflection. He released statements describing the affair as a misunderstanding and insisting his marriage to Estelle had been strained for months before Lucia DeMarco entered the picture. Some interviews hinted at a possible reconciliation, while others painted Estelle as distant, implying that she had neglected Donovan in favor of her own interests. The contradiction in his narratives only fueled the public's fascination. Commentators on news programs labeled the entire spectacle the unraveling of a power couple, each offering a theory for Donovan's brazen actions. Social media chatter dissected Estelle's public appearances, praising her poise, empathizing with her plight, or dissecting her maternity outfits. Even Lucia DeMarco became a trending topic, with critics labeling her as an opportunist who capitalized on Donovan's midlife restlessness. One afternoon, Estelle received a phone call from a prominent talk show host named Felicity Monroe, known for championing women's voices and tackling sensitive social issues with empathy. "Estelle," Felicity said warmly, "I'd love to give you a platform to share your side. Not a tabloid spectacle, just a respectful conversation about what you're going through." Initially, Estelle hesitated. Part of her yearned for privacy, especially as her pregnancy progressed and the emotional toll weighed heavier each day. On the other hand, she recognized that speaking publicly, on her own terms, could reclaim control over a story that was being appropriated by every gossip outlet. After deliberating with Margaret and Anders, Estelle decided that an interview with a compassionate host might be her best chance to set the record straight without turning her personal life into further spectacle. On the arranged evening, Estelle slipped into an elegant but simple maternity gown, her hair styled in a soft, understated way. She journeyed to a quiet studio rather than a crowded stage, ensuring an intimate ambience. Felicity Monroe greeted her with a reassuring smile, guiding her to two armchairs arranged beneath gentle lighting. When the cameras rolled, the conversation felt less like an interrogation and more like a vulnerable, heartfelt exchange. For the first time, Estelle spoke frankly about the betrayal, the pregnancy, and her resolve to build a healthier environment for her child. She addressed Donovan's accusations, clarifying that she had never concealed her pregnancy to gain an advantage. Rather, she'd chosen her birthday to share the news because she had yearned for a moment of unity. By the interview's end, she sensed that she had not only earned public sympathy, but also claimed back part of her identity that Donovan's affair had threatened to overshadow. The morning after her interview with Felicity Monroe, Estelle awoke to an outpouring of support on social media, through personal messages, and from philanthropic colleagues who admired her steadfast composure. She was inundated with heartfelt comments praising her strength and condemning Donovan's choices. Her father, Anders, expressed his pride in her decision to stand up for integrity while handling adversity with remarkable grace. For Estelle, it wasn't just a PR victory. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one where she dictated the narrative rather than simply reacting to Donovan's indiscretions. Donovan, however, saw the interview as an overt challenge to his public image. While some of his advisors urged him to issue a humble apology and attempt a softer stance, he struggled with the idea of conceding fault. He was Donovan Kingsley, accustomed to winning negotiations by sheer willpower. To him, this scandal was just another negotiation, albeit with higher emotional stakes. Caught between illusions of invulnerability and the harsh reality that every misstep now eroded public trust, Donovan vacillated between anger and denial. Lucia DeMarco, feeling the growing pressure, demanded clarity about her future. Would Donovan finalize a divorce to be with her, or was she about to become the scapegoat in a situation spiraling beyond control? Meanwhile, Margaret advanced the legal proceedings. "We should prepare for an adversarial approach," she warned Estelle. "Donovan's team might try to discredit you in every way possible, especially because you're pregnant." Sure enough, new rumors emerged, floated by anonymous sources, suggesting Estelle was prone to emotional outbursts, thereby casting doubt on her suitability as a parent. Hurt but undeterred, Estelle reminded herself of her own worth. She had spent her life building a reputation based on compassion and authenticity. No rumor could destroy that unless she allowed it to. Realizing how corrosive the Manhattan spotlight had become, Estelle decided to spend the latter phase of her pregnancy away from the incessant media glare. She reached out to her Aunt Harriet in the English countryside, who owned a stately manor set amid rolling hills and quaint villages. When Harriet extended an invitation, Estelle felt relief flood through her. She arranged to quietly depart with minimal staff, leaving Anders in charge of the estate and her legal counsel in Margaret's capable hands. Stepping onto a private plane, Estelle watched the twinkling lights of the city disappear beneath the clouds. In that moment, she sensed a profound transition. She was no longer the anxious woman cornered at her own birthday party. She was a mother-to-be, determined to shield herself and her child from further harm. Upon arriving in England, she found immediate solace in the manor's ivy-draped walls and peaceful gardens. Morning walks through dew-kissed fields, afternoon tea with Aunt Harriet, and evenings spent reading by the fireplace gave her the emotional space she so desperately needed. Each day, her unborn baby's subtle movements reminded her of the promise of new life. She wrote letters to her legal team, clarifying her intent to seek full custody and a fair settlement, not out of spite, but to ensure her child's well-being would never be compromised. The more time Estelle spent in that serene corner of the world, the more she felt her old self returning, strong, self-possessed, and fueled by an unwavering love for the life growing inside her. Even so, a part of her wondered if Donovan would attempt one last move, an apology or a dramatic gesture of remorse. Yet day after day passed with no such sign, just sporadic news clips about him juggling corporate investors and deflecting blame for the fiasco. Estelle closed her eyes each evening, imagining the quiet lullabies she would sing to her child, hoping to instill a sense of calm that had become so elusive in her own life. No matter how Donovan responded, she resolved to stand firm. She had reached a point of no return, but also a horizon of infinite possibilities. And as she gazed out across the rolling countryside, she smiled at the thought that true empowerment was hers to embrace. No scandal or betrayal could erase the future she intended to build. Now that you've glimpsed the turmoil brewing within this fractured marriage, it's time to delve deeper into the intense confrontations, hidden heartbreaks, and ultimate resolutions that lie ahead. As new revelations unfold, each character struggles with the delicate balance between loyalty and self-preservation. The stakes have never been higher, especially with an innocent child soon to be born into the storm. Will they reconcile for the sake of the baby? Or does the final twist set them on uncharted paths? Join us on this emotional roller coaster, where forgiveness and retribution dance a precarious waltz. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss another gripping installment. We welcome your comments. Tell us where you're listening from and share your predictions for how everything might conclude. Stay tuned for more fascinating stories right here on our channel.